the most surprising thing to you and your organization about resilience and your own organization? Yeah. So anybody want to take a chance to this? Go ahead.
Is it on?
Make sure it's on. Flip on.
There we go.
Yeah.
And I had said to Chris earlier, I don't need the microphone, so people at the food bank know how loud I can be. So, I think one of the most alarming things for me is, again, you can have a plan and try to utilize certain segments of that plan, but we look at some of the organizations that we deal with. So I mentioned that we have an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding with FEMA. We actually house a certain amount of bottled water in our facility. We also, when they ask us to, and we have in the past, house MREs. But again, even though we have that in-house, depending on the disaster, we may not be able to get it to the client. So that to me was, you can have the best plan, but you have to be able to morph and transition that plan based on what that natural disaster is. So.
Just for people who don't know, an MRE is a meals ready to eat.
Right,
that,
right.
In case anybody doesn't know that. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's good. And is that, do those come from the military? Or
yes,
yeah.
yes. It's actually a military grade MRE that we had, and actually that particular year we didn't need to use them, so we had the opportunity to ship them out to the, put them online for the local pantries to order. So.
And for those of you who haven't had an MRE, they're delicious. Not really. So I'll go next. I think I'm in the same lines as Cheryl is we can have the best plan, and I told you guys before that we're constantly changing our plan. And as I read through the report here, the thing that really concerns me here is that if we can't get the product to the stores, that is the most concerning piece of it, because we have distribution centers, we have the product, we have outside resources, but if the trucks can't get to the facilities, whether it's to Cheryl's facility, to my grocery stores, to any of the other local grocery stores, it doesn't really do us any good. And so, reading through this, the two major interstates are a concern.
Let me follow up with you directly, because for those who don't know, the Stop&Shop major distributorship in this region is down in Freetown off Route 24. Does that ever give you nightmares just thinking about Route 24?
Yes. As a matter of fact, this morning. But yeah, it's very concerning. And even if, for whatever reason, if our Freetown distribution center was not able to fulfill our needs, we couldn't even really have other distribution centers come through if the two major interstates are not accessible. So I think for me that's really a big takeaway to really take a look at it. Does our contingency plan wrap around that, and does it give us a solution for that?
Yeah, I think I'm sort of in line with Chris. Throughout the process, it really became clear that the Greater Boston Food Bank is really a critical component of resilience. And what was most interesting is a lot of the people we talked to, they expressed reliance on the food bank. They're like, oh, we'll go to the food bank. They've got it covered. But then when we talk to the food bank, it's like, oh, we actually can't do X, Y, Z. We can't provide food in this sort of capacity that some people kind of expect it. For example, you can't, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't distribute directly to people, right? It has to go through an agency.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we need that network of the member agencies to open.
Right.
I mean, another challenge that we have is we can't stockpile milk.
Right.
So as much of the preparation that we want to have, the preparation for us is more so on the non-perishable side. You know, the way that I call it Stocky does it. They'll ship the milk right to the stores. If we have the capability to ship the milk right to the pantries, that would be the next phase of something that we're looking at. But you're absolutely right, Austin.
Yeah, there's just such reliance, but still, there's still that aspect of miscommunication that I think still needs to be resolved. And then I sort of think that the next biggest surprise is just where we are in contingency planning with like the Red Cross, Stop&Shop, Greater Boston Food Bank. They all have great contingency plans, but oftentimes the smaller stores, they're not at the level of contingency planning as the larger corporations that have access to resources. So we really, and this is something we continue to grapple with our research, is better understanding how small businesses can prepare for storms and what resources both the city and other agents can provide for stores to help them reopen.
David, do you want to add to that, or do you want to go ahead?
I'm sorry, Chris, it's been a long day. Could you...
It's just basically one thing that surprised you the most out of the study or out of this process.
You know, I think it's been really eye-opening to me. To be honest, I just read the study a few, 2 days ago and preparing for today, and it was a really fascinating study. And it really, just really heightened my awareness of, just not taking things too much for granted, that, we have to have something in place just in case, the unimaginable happens. So, we're of course limited on what we can do as a food pantry. I think the key will be sort of sitting down with the food bank, sitting down with, all the players involved with this, and just kind of give our perspective and say, this is what we need and how can we sort of facilitate that to make it easier.
Let's open up to the audience, and I'm going to go with on the aisle there, and then Martin and then so.
Thank you so much for your presentations.
There's
Thank you so much. There's been a focus on the food bank as critically important in the network of resilience. So I want to ask about an aspect you touched on at the beginning, which is the volunteers, the amazing number of volunteers at the food bank. To what extent is the reliance on volunteers a potential vulnerability in a crisis situation, and how would the food bank communicate with them, and is there any precedent to draw on volunteers in time of crisis?
Excellent question, thank you. So I mentioned that we have 25,000 volunteers that go through the building, and we rely on them to sort food, pack food. They work on the shipping docks. David's trucks show up at 7 o'clock 3 or 4 times a week. I'm usually there by 6. We actually open at 4. We like the early appointment, so thank you. But we rely on those volunteers more for our 6-day-a-week operation. We have not had the opportunity to utilize their services or need to utilize their services, but I think that's something that we should look at. So to Chris's point about people, something that keeps me up at night are truck drivers. We have 8 Class A, Class B, CDL certified truck drivers. That is actually a dying breed. We are looking for an additional truck driver. We have one gentleman that has spent 25 years at the Greater Boston Food Bank. That's the first ever. And that he is going to retire someday, and so are his other colleagues. So we would potentially look, for a volunteer truck driver that has retired to fill that gap or fill that need. Great question.
This is for the non-profit people among you. To what extent do you rely on federal dollars, and what do you expect to happen in the next few days?
Yes, great. I hope you're a Patriots fan, but I sense the accent, so I don't think that you're originally from Boston, like Stacy not being originally from Boston, so that's great. We actually have subsets of buckets where we get food and money from the federal government and the state government. So if you live in the state of Massachusetts and you are a taxpayer, we get $17 million from the state that we share with the other 3 food banks. That is called MFAP, Massachusetts Emergency Food Assistance Program. We lobby every year for that. We actually utilize 8% of that funding for locally grown farmers. We have a network of 43 or 44 farmers that we use throughout the state. So that's money that we get from the state to buy nutritious food. It has a 98% nutrition rating. I buy my peanut butter from Teddy Levitt Corporation that is in Everett, Massachusetts. Might not be the same spec that you would see in the natural set of the Stop and Shop, but it's still a high quality, A grade. So that's a piece of the state funding that we get to purchase food. We also get food, free food, from the federal government, USDA or TFAP, the Emergency Food Assistance Program. And there's a great article, I happened to get these today, these are hot off the press, our winter newsletter, and it talks about where we get the food and the percentages of food breakdown. So take a copy if you'd like to have a copy, it's a really good read. I don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of days. I'm very hopeful. You know, generally my glass is half empty, but since I've come to the nonprofit side, my glass is half full. I mean, I think folks were nervous, you know, when the lead at the mayor race changed. The former mayor was an unbelievably good friend of the food bank. We have pictures of him all over the building. He was there all the time, but this mayor is as well. Folks were nervous with the new governor, and I'm not. In case you haven't noticed, I'm not shy. And I walked right up to him at an event at Newmarket and said, "Hi, I'm Cheryl Schondek, come visit us. You know, I need 20 million for MeFab." No, we didn't get it, we only got 17, but I'll ask again. So I'm cautiously optimistic that folks will keep an open mind, and it's really nonpartisan to feed hungry people. So I think I'm in the best place at the best time. It's a well-run organization, and if I have to fly down to DC, I certainly will. But great question. Hope I helped to answer your question. But you can be the first one to take one of our copies of our newsletter, so that we'll share where our food comes from. And I'm going to get you a couple of copies of the last one. It talks about our drivers and what they do and how they start at 4 in the morning and where they go, you know, all over eastern Massachusetts. It is overwhelming, but it's a great place to be.
Anybody else want to comment on that question?
Yeah, well, at the Greater Boston Food Bank, we have various contracts. We have a SNAP reimbursement contract that the food bank has received that as well. So for the expenses we incur for SNAP outreach, you know, so it could be use of the computer, utility, you know, transportation costs to go do SNAP outreach, the cost of personnel, our outreach worker, various percentages of our salaries, that's recorded, and then we can put a reimbursement claim and receive grant dollars for that. We receive EFSP dollars, emergency food. Yes, I forgot this. Anyway, EFSP has been around for 34 years. We've received it for every 34 years. We're in the 34th phase right now, so we receive dollars for our New Bedford food pantry and our Boston food pantry, and as Cheryl mentioned, we got allotment of the MeFab product and TFAP product of federal subsidized food. So I hope that answers your question, young lady. In terms of volunteerism, when it comes to like snowstorms or times where it could be perilous for our volunteers to come and help us, regardless of whether we're open or not. For example, tomorrow we called off all of our volunteers just for safety reasons. And we actually have some volunteers that say, "Damn the torpedoes," and they show up anyway. So our volunteers are just amazing. They really inspire me every day. I've been there for 14 years. So, so yeah, I don't know if the answers.
Hi, I have a question for Stacy. You mentioned that Stop and Shop donates 2 million pounds of food every year, and in the United States we waste 40% of our food. So is part of that 2 million pounds donated food that would be going to waste? And how does Stop and Shop, what do you guys do to avoid food waste? And how do you decide what food is donated?
Outstanding question. What I can tell you is the food that we do give is food that is still edible. Anything that is unedible, we now have an anaerobic digester that we have in our Freetown facility that we put all of that food waste into, and that generates electricity to run our Freetown facility. That's a new project that we just unveiled last October. So we're very excited about that. So we are working extremely hard to make sure that the food waste, that is actual waste, goes into the digester, and the good product goes out to the food banks.
I was curious if you could talk about the economics that go into these contingency plans and, planning for future storms. Because these don't happen every day, but you have to put it into your budget. I'm just curious if you can talk about that from both the for-profit and nonprofit standpoint. Is it just part of your general operating, stuff like that?
I'll go ahead and start for the business side of it. The way that we do put it into the budget is we take a look at history, and we'll go 4 to 5 years back, because you take the major snowstorm in 2015. That doesn't happen every single year, but we do know that we do get snowstorms, so we go back and we take a look at that, and we budget for some spikes in sales, some decreases in sales, naturally our shrink sometimes would get higher because of the lack of sales, so we do take all that into consideration when we're doing the yearly budget. And it's based off of trend.
Thank you. And I would have to say, we actually do the same thing. So we look at, we are a nonprofit, but we are really, we're run like a business. So we also look at trends. Clearly, I was overspent on the snowstorm of 2015 because we actually had to do some additional fundraising, if you will, or ask if people would donate so that we could remove snow from the parking lot. We never had to do that before. But we do look at trends, we look at budgeting, and we also rely on our development team on their fundraising skills, of which we go out to local retailers, manufacturers, wholesalers. As I mentioned, Stacy sits on our Food Industry Council. That's a subset of the board. And Mark McGowan, you saw his picture up there. He's the president of Stop&Shop. He sits on the board of directors. So we have a great network of wholesalers, retailers, manufacturers. Before I go and buy rock salt, I see if I can get it free. Or if I go to Stacy's team. We actually purchase product from Stop&Shop, from Shaw's at their cost. So I'll buy, an own brand label, and it's still less expensive, for a pantry before they go into a retailer to purchase that product. So a lot of similarities, just some slight differences in that we would look at the fundraising aspect.
Just to add to that, with all the companies that we've talked to for our research, that a lot of them say there's a strong business case for business continuity, because you're essentially, if you can't provide service or a product, you're not making any money. So it's in a business's best interest to be prepared. And there are oftentimes low-cost solutions to plan for business continuity, like having a communication plan in place, or knowing who are the right people to talk to. That's a relatively small investment in business continuity versus completely revamping your building or moving it to a different place. And that's sort of the strong case for continuity.
Or even having to rent the generator. So before, that was one of the largest capital investments that we've had in several years. And before we, went into that scenario, we did a lot of financial opportunity gap savings, what will happen, things of that nature. So it took us a while, but it was a good decision.
I actually have two questions. One, to hook onto this food waste point that was just made, and it's both for the for-profits and the nonprofits. So the question is, what have you learned about food waste that happens within a storm? Because I imagine that in some cases you really gear up, and then if you have to be closed for a couple of days, there's waste that gets generated. And also for Austin, maybe understanding what you need to plan for when you're dealing with a large amount of food waste and how a city can kind of heal itself in that.
Yeah, I can start. So you should read our latest report where we address food waste. And I think a lot, or just in general, food waste is such a new concept, and resilience is a new concept too. And we're just starting to blend the two concepts. So for us, and I'm sure for the nonprofit world, they see food waste as sort of a good thing because they can now divert food, edible food, and from grocery stores, from manufacturers, and use it to feed hungry people. And there's sort of incentives working in place to get companies to provide more food waste. There are tax incentives and what have you. So that's sort of the broad spectrum, or the broad level view is it's new, both new concepts, and we're still at the we're still trying to get a better understanding about the interplay. But during a disaster, it's hard to say because a lot of times perishable food, if it's still edible, it's still good to either be sold or it can be donated as long as it meets safety standards. But if, for example, you have a lot of frozen goods, your power goes out, then there's nothing you can do with it, so then it has to go to waste. And then it's sort of, I guess the next sort of aspect of research that needs to be done is what you can do to mitigate sort of the impact of that waste.
I think some of it is finding where the waste is and making sure that we can either take that food to the Greater Boston Food Bank or bring that to a local pantry. So we had a very successful organization that we dealt with in BJ's, and we actually have 19 stores in our service area. Before the food goes to waste, what we've done is we've partnered an agency because of the location of the store. So by the time some of that food that is very close to code comes to the Greater Boston Food Bank, it would go to waste. It goes right to the pantry so that people can consume that food. But we also look at trends. So not just trends during a snowstorm, and we want all of our partners to be successful with sales, go for sales, because their success is driven from our success. It's a direct correlation. We look at trends even in, I'm glad when we have rain during Memorial Day holidays, because my bread donations will increase, because Gold Medal in Fall River is one of a very good donor of ours. They won't ship the bread to the local retailers because people aren't gonna have barbecues. So we not only look at disasters, we also look at, peaks and valleys and spikes. And again, spending 25 years on the retail side, some of that just comes naturally as it relates to what type of donations that we may receive. Because again, one of the slides I showed, 50% of the food we purchase with money that we fundraise, money that we get from the state, 50% is donated from wholesalers, retailers, manufacturers, and the federal government, the USDA piece.
And I'll speak from the grocery side. For our everyday business, we have a very good replenishment system to where it limits the amount of waste and overage of food product that we have. That doesn't mean that we don't have some. There naturally is some, but I want to talk about the disaster piece of it because I did experience that. I told you guys about the Hurricane Sandy piece, and that was something that we didn't plan for. We didn't plan for 81 stores to lose power. And when that happens, you only have a handful of generators to get to the stores because we don't have 213 generators on site. We would love to be able to get all the stores up and running. So you had to pick. You had to pick and choose where you were going to send those generators. And you had to rely on the power companies to give you the ETA for the power coming back on. And oh, by the way, when they tell you 2 weeks, dry ice can only take you so far. And we also had a limited supply of reefer trucks, refrigerated trucks that we could get distributed throughout because they couldn't get on the roads. And where we had staged them, maybe that facility didn't lose power, so it was useless for us there. So what ended up happening with us is we actually had to rent open tops, and we had to load up the open tops. And that was a very big process. because all of the perishables were ruined. You couldn't save them, you couldn't send them to the food pantries. The food pantries didn't even have power, so there was no sense in us sending the product there. So we open-topped everything, and I'm going to tell you, it was hundreds of open-tops, hundreds. And
It's a dumpster.
That's a dumpster for those of you who don't know. It is a dumpster.
Yeah.
And we even had a hard time, honestly, getting companies to deliver those dumpsters to us in a timely manner. So what ended up happening is if we happened to have a box truck at our bay, at our docks, we would load it up with the product, and then when the dumpsters got there, we would have to take it off and then dump it into the dumpsters and get it hauled away. So that is something that needs to be looked at, because it is a big deal. If there is a disaster, we didn't think about that, and it is a big deal. So that's a great question.
Let me follow that up though, before I go to, I mean, you sort of can't plan for, I mean, you can't, I mean, your point about the generators, from a business standpoint, having a generator for every store would be economically unwise.
Right.
Or would it? I mean, what do you plan for in terms of, do you plan for the worst case scenario? I mean, you alluded to that a bit, that you sort of play the averages, in a sense, and then you get whacked. I mean, it's sort of, what's the sort of, I mean, from both business and from all of you, it's sort of like, what do you plan for, in a sense?
Yeah, so honestly, some stores can't be hooked up to a generator because some of our facilities are so old that they don't have the proper generator hookup. And to get those switched out, it is very costly. So you do have to, you have to budget for that. And if you don't budget for that, then it comes off of your bottom line. So what we typically do is we take a look at history once again. And we say, okay, history has it that Nantucket goes down, they lose power every single time the wind blows up to 40 miles an hour. So we automatically have a generator staged out there. And then, you know, we've strategically, and I'm specifically talking about the New England division right now, every single time there is a storm, we get on the phone on a conference call and we say, where are we going to stage generators? Where are we going to stage the reefer trucks? Who needs dry ice? How many pallets do we need in Freetown? How many drivers do we have available? So if we happen to have power outages, who's committed to driving that dry ice out to the stores? And if a store loses power that doesn't fit the trend, then we quickly have to shift gears and say, all right, we need you to go get that generator from that store, get it over to this store because it's going to be down for 6 hours. And for those of you who don't know, after 4 hours of power being down, it's necessary to get dry ice, generators, reefer trucks. That's when you kind of start to panic a little bit and think that you're going to lose all the product that you have in the building. So it's extremely tough. You're kind of playing a guessing game, but you're going based off of the trend, based off of the weather, and you just have to quickly make adjustments when you can.
Anybody else?
I'll just add that the food pantry, we actually have very little wastage. We're usually able to sort of survey what the product is, sort of forecast based on recent years and just the weather and all that. Approximately how many families will come in, and then we sort of ration things in a way where we'll have enough to last the whole day. We never really run out of food. Occasionally we have to sort up the amounts of food that we're giving per bag, per family, so that we have very little food left over. If occasionally there is some food that isn't really suitable to give to people, and to determine that our rationale, the simplest way is to tell our volunteer, when you pick up the food, if you personally would not eat it or keep it in your refrigerator, or if you would toss it personally, then let's toss it. So if there is food that is left over that we can't give to people, we do work with a local farm in Dartmouth, Mass. They come up and they pick up the food and they give it to their Angus cattle and pigs and stuff like that. So it's a kind of beautiful circle of life thing,
My second question is maybe for Austin and Cheryl, but it's around, Austin, you mentioned the small store contingency planning that you're doing right now. Is there being that Cheryl quoted that 68% of the pantries come to the food bank to do pickups, what contingency planning is happening, if any, for the pantries to help them get back up and running more quickly.
Yeah, I'm sure Cheryl has a better answer for this than I do. But from what we've heard, and this isn't necessarily in Boston, this has been in our research in other cities. For example, in New York, this has been an issue for the New York City Food Bank, is how prepared are their members to a disaster. And they've been working with their members to help ensure better lines of communication, better ensuring certain aspects of the contingency. And I think we'll see that more and more as pantries think about natural disasters. And I think Feeding America is doing a lot of work with other food banks to help them work with their food pantries around business continuity or contingency planning.
Right. Yeah, great question, because again, we're only as good, we can have all the food, but if we can't get it out to the pantries and the clients can't make it into the pantries, then those folks go, those 130,000 meals a day go unused. But we try to do the same thing. So we actually tier our member agencies, and it's that old 80-20 rule. So, David is a tier 1. You saw he was over 3 million pounds of food. And we try to work with the pantries as best we can as it relates to education. How can they be prepared? We do a lot of food safety training. There was food safety training yesterday in the building where we offer that to the member agencies to come in on how to handle the food. So there is a lot of give and take. We listen what they need and we try to give them, but we try to make them aware of our contingency plan when it comes into fruition to make sure that they're aware. And it's great to hear that David's going to be open tomorrow because we got the food out today to those member agencies in case the clients can come in. But I think that is probably another huge phase of a resiliency project in an effort to make sure that those pantries are up and running.
I think this question might be more for Austin, but we've talked a lot about things from like the private and the nonprofit sector perspective, but I'm curious from the public sector. So in your research, if you've come across like cities and policies, so much of this stuff is regional, this distribution center in this town affects this city and whatever, but Boston has an office of food initiatives, but not all cities do. And even if they did, regional governance is a hard thing. So just curious if you had any opportunities or challenges or things that you discovered or things that are kind of percolating about where the public sector comes into play and how like regional things on like the policy governance level works.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think more and more you're seeing cities take ownership of not just their city, but collaborating with regions. So Boston's a great example of this. So Boston's in the 100 Resilient Cities Network. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, that's a network started by the Rockefeller Foundation that looks to provide cities with resources to think about resilience. So I think at the city level, you're seeing broader movements towards resilience and putting this on top of minds. And what the purpose of the Chief Resilience Officer, so each city has one, is to coordinate all the respective agencies. And those can be just at the city level. So Boston's Chief Resilience Officer will work with the Office of Food Initiatives, with the food access issues, but she'll also work with the Office of the Environment for the natural disaster aspects. And then I also see some coordination at the regional level. So in Boston, there's the MAPC, which is the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. And you're seeing a lot of coordination at the regional level where Boston's playing a leading role, but also other cities are playing a role too. And a perfect example is Chelsea and Everett are really big hubs for food in Boston. So there's the New England Produce Center and the Boston Terminal Market, which one of them, the New England Produce Center, is the largest private distribution center in the country. So the city of Boston and Chelsea and Everett and everyone in the MAPC network has made looking at the resilience of that distribution hub, one of their main focuses for preparing for climate change and natural disasters and resilience.
We actually have a member from the New England produce area as well on our food industry. So part of our contingency that I do is make sure that I have, you know, pieces of that pie in case we need anything. Mark DeMichaelis, if many of you have eaten Olivia's bag salads, he's the owner of that plant. So he sits on our food industry as well. We actually had one of our meetings there, which was nice.
This is directly to, I guess, Cheryl and David. In terms of the works of the food pantries, to what extent are you able to address the needs of specific populations in regards to food needs? You know, diabetics, people with health issues, and then also people who have religious issues with foods that they can eat, the increasing Muslim population.
Right.
And I actually volunteered at the Red Cross Pantry this week and was very impressed by the efficiency of it.
It looks so familiar.
But it was also, there was, everybody had the same deal.
Yeah,
And
you're right. Yeah.
So, I was wondering how you're addressing those kinds of issues.
You know, it's a really tough situation. You know, we're staying 500 families in 3 hours. We distribute various ways in our mobile markets. We do a choice model or bag food model. You know, we can adopt with either distribution method. But in our Boston food pantry, like talk about, you know, it's a very small space. There's a lot of space needed for the product, bagged food, the inventory of pallets of food, the bodies of volunteers, staff, and then we have wagons of food, bringing food from the refrigeration to the front of the house to distribute, and it's really fast-paced. You know, within 3 hours, 500 families need to pick up their food, and the location of the food pantry is right off of Mass Ave in the New Market area. It's a side street, Proctor Street, and we do have problems with just traffic control. You know, cars double park and they can't get through, and it's just amazing. You know, I haven't heard firearms. You know, it's insane. People get so angry, and you know, so it's a really tough situation to accommodate special requests. The best we do in terms of our Boston distribution is if you know there's a bag of food and someone's going to receive, you know, some kind of food, say they have peanut allergy or something, they see there's peanut butter in their bag. You know, not every bag's identical. We try to do it equitably so that the value and the nutrition value and the monetary value is about equal. So, you know, one bag may have peanut butter, another bag may have brown rice. So, you know, we sort of just say, okay, you don't want the peanut butter, here's your brown rice. And that's kind of like the best we do. If we do honor special requests for one person, the rule is we have to do it for everybody, which is just the reality. We can't sort of play favorites for one person because they have a need. 42% of our clients have individuals with disability and a myriad of different dietary concerns. So it's a really tough situation, and we just do the best we can to, you know, just have people leave our pantry as happy as possible. But you know, to answer your question, sir, it's really hard to honor every dietary request.
So we are somewhat in the same boat, but when we do get items that are gluten-free or that are kosher certified, we try to make the clients, the pantries aware via a description, but we will never be able to do, you know, what they do at a conventional, you know, retail location. But we actually have a physician on staff. We just hired a woman who has a medical degree and a master's in public health. And we are looking at produce-only distribution sites at hospitals, at healthcare centers. So Charles River in the Alston-Brighton area, Charles River Healthcare was the first one that we distribute. We've been going to Fall River. We have other distributions in that area, but these are specific only to produce. And she is working with the team of physicians there on 2 food insecurity questions. So it's been eye-opening, the progress that we've made in the short time that she's been on staff. But we are not sophisticated enough to try to accommodate everyone. We do have some pantries that are specific to certain demographics, and we try to provide as much food to them as we possibly can. But they would go elsewhere to get some more specific needs for the clients that they serve. Yeah, we're not there yet. Someday.
Last question.
Thank you. I was wondering, is there any alternative in terms of financial assistance for people with needs, and in time of emergency, people cannot reach the pantries? So is there a way they can have food stamps or get reimbursement for the money that they spend on food at time of needs?
So our primary role, we are the food bank, so our primary role is to distribute food. But we do work, as David had said, we have one person on staff that assists with SNAP applications as it's relative to food stamps. And that also is an expanding area that we are looking at. But as it relates to other types of reimbursements, that's not my area of expertise. I don't know if that's specific to cities and towns. But we don't hand out vouchers, we don't hand out things of that nature. Our area of expertise is to hand out the food.
Yeah, good question. With all of the clients that use our service, of course, when they come into our pantry, the food is the star. They're there really for the food, but we really do try to extend ourselves to outreach to their SNAP needs. So everyone that comes in, we do ask them, are you receiving SNAP? If the answer is no, we kick into our outreach program. It's a 30-second process, really. Been doing it for 12 years. We could do it in our head for the most part. And we can break it down to the dollar, actually. It's the same spreadsheet that the welfare office uses. I myself, I'm on the advisory board at the welfare office. So, any issue with SNAP application status, if someone was denied for whatever reason when they should have received SNAP, we really do work hard with our advocacy to make sure that, hey, this person is pre-qualified, there's no reason why they shouldn't be receiving SNAP. A caseworker made an error for whatever reason, or something wasn't documented properly, indexed in their beacon system properly. So we really look into that hard. So when a client comes in, we kind of tackle their the reason to why they're there with 2 prongs. It's SNAP needs and it's the food, of course. But SNAP is very important. It really empowers people to go out and buy the food that they really want rather than what they see in the food pantry.
Well, first I want to thank our guests again for really insightful